I'm Sanjay Mirchandani, President and CEO of Commvault. Thank you for tuning in to the second episode in our Resilience Uncompromised video series, where I discuss cyber attacks and the need for cyber resilience with some amazing industry leaders. A few months ago, I had the distinct pleasure of meeting and getting to know Rosa Kariger, a leading cybersecurity expert and former CISO of Iberdrola. She's also the co-chair of the World Economic Forum's Systems of Cyber Resilience in Electricity Working Group. Rosa, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Sanjay, for having me today.
Pleasure. You know, when we got to know each other, you had an amazing background. So let's start maybe by sharing a little bit about your background and your experiences.
Well, I've been with my company for more than 25 years now, so it's really a lot. I am an industrial engineer, and I started in my company doing re-engineering in thermal generation, operation and maintenance, so very, very technical industrial job. And then I've had the opportunity to grow with the company and also in the acquisition of the many companies we now have all over the world. And I also set up the entire enterprise risk management system in 2003 from scratch for the entire group. And started specializing in different kinds of risk management, including credit risk, market risk, and then technological risk, which suddenly became cybersecurity. Right. So at that moment, I think I was in the best position to be appointed the global CISO at Iberdrola, which I've been for 8 years.
Wonderful. And, you know, critical infrastructure, obviously, very important. So given your background, given your experience, given the role of CISO, what does cyber resilience mean to you personally, and why is it so crucial for organizations like Iberdrola?
Yeah, well, I'd rather say resilience than cyber resilience, because for me, resilience is the ability of an organization to withstand any major disruption while keeping the ultimate purpose of this organization. No? So if you put the cyber up front, and you say cyber resilience, you tend to understand that this is about protecting the IT infrastructure or whatever. And I think this goes way beyond, yes, protecting the IT infrastructure. And it's more about the continuity of an essential service or business.
Absolutely. We've coined an expression here that we use, which is continuous business, the ability for a business to stay continuous, to stay connected and perform. So in your experience, what are some of the misconceptions, if you would, that leaders have about cyber resilience?
Well, exactly what I say. No, the major misconception is thinking that cyber resilience is just about the disaster recovery, backup. And in my experience, and I've seen it in several incidents, no, you see that when the IT infrastructure is down, the business stands there, arms crossed, waiting or shouting, when do I am going to have again connectivity or whatever. And this should not happen. I mean, this resilience and this cyber resilience is also responsibility of the business that needs to have a plan B. And while the IT infrastructure is being recovered, do something to keep this essential service. There is, I've been collaborated in the World Economic Forum in an initiative about smart cities and resilience in smart cities. And I think they made a very interesting approach, changing a little bit the NIST framework, and defined, in addition to the dimensions of identify, protect, detect, respond, detect, another dimension, which is sustain. Mm-hmm. And sustain is all about what the business needs to do, what's the plan B, while IT is recovering the infrastructure.
Absolutely. What is it that, what is the parallel work that has to happen? In light of that, it always, the technology supports the business, but it's the people that you have to have the right people with the right enablement to be able to bring things back. So what can organizations do to ensure that they're hiring people with the right skill sets to build a resilient or a cyber resilient culture, if you would?
Yeah, not only hiring, but also allocating. And I mean, because for me, the most important thing is having clear roles and responsibilities. And let me put an example. And we have the IT world and we have the OT world. Yeah, and it applies to both, but it's maybe clearer when you look at OT. If you have an engineer in a generation plant that is doing some digitalization of a process, you should not expect some CISO in the corporate to be protecting this infrastructure. So it is this engineer that needs to be held accountable and also have the proper training and the proper knowledge to face this new cybersecurity risk, or let's say risk derived from the increasingly digitized society. Yeah, which is why I think that people need to start understanding that we live in a digital society, and risk management that they had a responsibility before, they still have. Yeah. So of course we need specific cybersecurity professionals for the monitoring to coordinate incidents, but more and more we need to make sure that the people that are responsible of deploying any kind of technology are also responsible for their cybersecurity.
That's very important and well said. Which leads me to think about, okay, so as leaders who run different parts of the business or functions of the business, how do they need to structure their teams to build that culture so that that engineer feels enabled to be able to do the resilience that, as part of their job? So how do you structure your teams and build that culture?
Well, by having a cybersecurity function that is not held accountable for every single piece of technology, but rather is being like a consultant, internal consultant, where the businesses can go to make sure that they have the right support, they know the rules. So I think that the right organization is where cybersecurity has more a second line of defense role, more a supervisory or establishment of rules, also checking the defenses, providing intelligence. But I would certainly encourage all organizations to have specific cybersecurity responsibilities within their technical teams,
Sure.
their operational teams, in IT, in OT, or wherever, that do not report to cyber, but they have this specific responsibility.
Absolutely true. I mean, I'll give you a parallel. In engineering organizations, we train engineers to write more secure code. We give them tools to check their own security parameters in the code, so that before the code is checked in, they've done a level of defensive work to make sure that what they're submitting is actually quality work, from a security point of view. So it begins with each individual owning that and then rolling that up as a process.
And this, Sanjay, is something that I'm seeing where the regulation is not really bringing us there, or the best practices. Because, as an example, you've told that you make them responsible for the quality or whatever. But what I'm seeing still a lot is that some IT or even OT technology professionals are being held responsible for the quality of the technology or the code or whatever, the efficiency, the cost, the time. But if there is a cybersecurity incident, the CISO is blamed. Someone else is blamed. So what incentive do technical professionals have in doing things cyber secure if they're not going to be held accountable, they're not going to be blamed, but instead the CISO will be, yeah? And this is something that we really need to change.
It has to be distributed, which brings me to sort of the next thought, which is this needs to become part of the prioritization for teams, right? I mean, the awareness and the accountability even. So in your experience, are there anything you can share that that become key priorities for teams to focus on, so that the organization overall has better cyber resilience?
Well, I think it's having a very good understanding that cyber is just another risk. It is an operational risk, and it needs to be included in risk assessment. So for me, everything is risk assessment because, and I know many cybersecurity professionals, we just want to eliminate risk, no? But risk is there, it needs to be accepted, it needs to be understood and managed. So the most important part is that every single employee, even as a user or making technological decisions, operational decisions, is aware that there are risks to the use of technology and that they need to understand this risk to make informed decisions. So risk management is for me the most important one. And the second one is preparedness, because we need to increase our tolerance to failure. Yeah, and I know it's hard. We don't want to have cyber attacks. We don't want to have incidents, but we will, and we just need to change our mindset and start thinking. So, what will happen if I don't have any technology? Let's do scenarios of complete loss of connectivity or something like this, no? And for the most critical pieces, have a plan B.
Absolutely. You know, we call that continuous business. How do you keep your business continuous in a completely connected world? And it's a different set of challenges than what we used to call business continuity, which was a static situation. Now it's a connected world. It's a connected business, and making sure that you're resilient across all of those aspects becomes a whole new dimension, a whole new challenge. And in closing, you and I both often speak to people that are not IT folks or are not super technical. And what advice would you give a leader who's maybe running a company or a senior person in a company that's not a technical person on building a culture of cyber resilience? What would your advice be, Rosa?
Well, my advice would be that most leaders do two things, Sanjay. They define a strategy and then they manage the risk. Yeah. So they need to understand that if now they're making these decisions in a digital world, many of the risks they're facing are cybersecurity risk. So as a leader, I would not accept to myself or to any of my senior management team that they say, no, I don't understand cyber. Yeah, sorry, but you need to understand cyber. You don't need to understand the technology, the TTPs, all the jingle bingle. You just need to understand that there is a risk to digitizing your business. And you need to understand this risk no matter what. So this is the important part, understanding the risk and then doing the right things to manage it.
So acknowledging the fact that you have to have your skills at a certain level to be able to manage your business because your business is connected.
Yeah, and look, San, you said that we have a kind of different business continuity concept now, and I tend to agree since we are in a more volatile society. But at the end, we have, and when you come from an industrial company, you've been seeing for the past 200 years that engineers were just focusing on continuity and preparedness for failure. Yeah. So why do we need to change this? Let's continue with this mindset, but we need to feed in the new connectivity. We have increased collaboration, but still focusing in protecting, in this mindset of protecting the essential value of your process.
Because you have dependencies today like we've never had before. You use APIs, you connect with your suppliers, you collect, it's just you're always connected. Rosa, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed our conversation. You have a wonderful background and so much knowledge that I'm hoping our viewers can take advantage of. So thank you again for being with us on this this podcast, and I hope to see you soon. Hopefully in Madrid.
Hopefully you're soon in Madrid again, Sanjay. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much.